the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and good evening to everyone. Welcome. My name is Ron Cho, and I'm with Papa, Asian Pacific Islander, American Public Affairs. I just want to also introduce the co-hosts of tonight's town hall, Asian Business Association of San Diego. Thank you to Wendy, Earl, and Robert. Empowering Pacific Islander communities. The Asian Pacific American Coalition, Michael Wong, Chair. The San Diego Asian American for Equality, Frank Liu, Chair. And Asian Pacific Islander American Vote, Christine Chen is their executive director, and Tana Lipuli is also on the board as well. Now, API Vote did something very courageous over the summer. They did a town hall, presidential town hall in Las Vegas, and APAPA and many of the San Diego Asian organizations participated in that. It would be a great dream of ours if we can pull one of those off in San Diego. So there are 6 participating organizations tonight. This is truly an outstanding show of collaborative effort to be at the table, as I am really encouraged by the Asian Americans, Pacific Islander communities, and the business communities to work together. Not only just one voice, but a collaborative voice. It's important that we collectively impact how our elected officials govern and enact social, economic, and business policies for the betterment of our APIA communities. We would also like to show our appreciation to AT&T, San Diego Gas and Electric, and the Yin Foundation, which CC Yin is the founder of APAPA and is represented tonight by Nelson and Elizabeth Huang. They drove all the way down from San Diego, from Los Angeles. Nelson is governing board of APAPA and is also the Southern California regional chair. A very special thanks to Sheraton Four Points, Bernie Enterprises, Lucy Bernie. Thank you so much for your generosity, for being a gracious host. This room and the food and beverages are also provided by Lucy and her staff. So thank you so much. I walked the other day, I didn't introduce myself when I came here, but I walked the property, and what a great property from a perspective of, you got the conference rooms over there. In the back, there's a huge pavilion. I'm sure we could have filled up that pavilion too. So thank you again for your generosity. Special thanks to our volunteers from the Confucius Institute, Yu Ying Zhang and her team. Thank you. Last but not least, to the Town Hall Planning Committee, Earl Wong, Robert Ito, and my fellow APAPA board members, Kwa Win and Deb Zavari. So thank you, everyone. So I want to, as you know, this election, the San Diego County with the election, there's a particular entity, the registrar of voter, that will be in high visibility and gearing up already. But I wanted to introduce Juanito Amor Jr. He wants to say a few words from the registrar of voters.
Thank you, Ron. Good evening, everyone. So you probably can see my sign over here, register. So we've done that. We got to go out there and vote. So in behalf of the County of San Diego registered voters, we thank you for allowing us to speak to you all for this wonderful 2016 Town Hall meeting for our community. Again, we are now open for voting in our office. We started in October 24th and will be open until the election day. What day is the election day, guys? Tuesday and what? November 8th. Please, it's not November 7th, it's not November 6th, it's November 8th. So please go ahead and tell your family and friends and community to go out there and vote. Especially for this election, this is the biggest election we ever had for the registrar's office. We have over 1,000, let's see, let me take that back. With the 4 candidates that we have today, we have actually 364 candidates. And that is the biggest of all, and we have 4 of them today. And then again, for our communities that are voting by mail, today was the last day to register to vote by mail. So please again, contact your family and friends. Go to our website, sdvote.com. We have our information in the back. Please grab a pen, and with that pen, there is our phone number there that you can call. So again, have a wonderful night tonight, and thank you for allowing us to speak about our elections.
And without further ado, let's start this evening's event. I would like to introduce Melissa Masiha with ABC 10 News. Melissa is currently with the 10-team daily investigation throughout San Diego County. You'll find her in the Breaking Live in the afternoon and evening segment. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Let's go ahead and get things started. And of course, I'm going to do the formal introductions here. First, we'll start with Congressman Scott Peters. Now, before being elected to Congress in 2012, he served as chair of the San Diego Unified Port District. Scott served at the port after completing 2 terms on the San Diego City Council, where he was San Diego's first city council president. Now, prior to entering public service, Scott had a 16-year legal career in private practice where he specialized in environmental law. He and his wife of 29 years reside, 30 years, reside in the La Jolla neighborhood of San Diego, of course, where they raised their son and daughter. And now let me introduce formally Denise Gitsham, born and raised in California. She is the only daughter of immigrants. Her mother is a Chinese immigrant who fled communism. Her father, a Canadian immigrant who served 20 years in the U.S. Air Force. She's a graduate of Georgetown University Law Center and has worked in the U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Senate, and White House. She practiced law at K&L Gates before joining a San Diego-based renewable energy company in 2009. Today, Denise owns her own small business. She's fluent in Mandarin and a co-founder of San Diego's Downtown Tech Group, also serves on the board of Scripps Mercy Hospital Foundation. So these are your 2 candidates. Thank you so much for being here this evening. We'll start with opening remarks for each candidate. We'll get 2 minutes, and Scott here won the coin toss.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone for being here and taking some time out from tonight. We're not missing much of a baseball game, I understand. So, I'm a child of a public service family. My dad is a minister who was active in desegregating housing in Detroit and the suburbs in the 1960s when if you were Jewish or you weren't white, you might have trouble buying a house. And I took that message of standing for what's right through my career in law, where I was part of which I spent as a small business owner with a 2-person law firm, and my career in public service on the City Council and the port, and now in the United States Congress. I build my service around San Diego. So San Diego is driven by tourism, by the uniformed military, and by science and innovation in places like Qualcomm, our largest private employer. I help out our innovators by pushing for basic science research funding, by pushing for immigration policy that lets us keep our talent here, and by pushing for education for our own kids through student loans and good support like I had when I was growing up. I push for our vets. I want to work for our vets, make sure they get jobs, make sure they get health care. We need to deal with the VA by providing its resources. but also assuring accountability, making sure that people don't just care about the paperwork on the desk as much, but they need to care about the veteran across from that at the desk. And in the Armed Services Committee, my portfolio is energy. I'm helping the Navy and Marines use sustainable energy sources to fight our nation's battles and protect our warfighters. I'm also a proud member of the Congressional Pacific Asian Caucus members, Pacific Asian Caucus, where they first were surprised to see me walk in. But 20% of my district is Asian API, and I'm proud to serve you all. I look forward to discussing those and many issues tonight. Thank you.
大家好，我叫吉小玉，我的妈妈是华人，她49年从大陆到台湾，然后69年来美国。For those of you who don't understand, Chinese is actually my first language. It's one that I learned at home when I was a child. And so for me, being here amongst you today is like being amongst family. When I look out over the diversity of our API community and I see all of you, so many of you have supported me from the very beginning, believed in me from the start in this election, it warms my heart and it makes me feel like I'm at home. And for those of you wearing Scott Peters stickers, I want your vote too, and I'm going to work hard to get it. So, you know, by way of background, you already heard a little bit about it, but I worked at the White House during 9/11. I also worked at the U.S. Department of Justice. I went to Georgetown Law School. I was working full-time. My parents didn't have much money. My dad was a teacher and a U.S. Air Force veteran that retired after 20 years. My grandfather was a 2-star general with Chiang Kai-shek. And so, you know, there was a lot of military service in my background. I am so proud to be part of the American dream. My parents told me when I was little, since they're both immigrants, my father's from Canada, that in America you can be anything you want if you work hard and you believe you can do it. And I really internalized that as a child. I worked hard for everything that we got, and now I'm fighting hard for this district. I want you to know one more thing that I think is so exciting about this race. And every time I get tired or I think, gosh, this is so difficult, Scott's such a good opponent. You know, why am I doing this? I dig deep and I think if I'm elected in this election cycle, I will be the first ever federal representative of API background, of ethnicity, to represent San Diego ever in our history. I will also be the first Chinese Republican congresswoman in the history of our nation, and as you know, based on everything that's happening in the news right now, it is more important than ever that we have bipartisan representation at the highest levels of government. So I want to thank all of you who've been so helpful to getting to this point, whoever imagined it would happen. And I want to thank all of you who are going to push me over the finish line.
And we're going to get started with our questions, so both candidates be mindful of the time. My keepers holding the cards right there, and also everyone can just make sure their cell phones are off so we don't ring during their answers. The first question here is, what is your position on government's role in the fight against poverty, and do you think the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, has been successful?
Well, we know, I think it's very clear that Obamacare has expanded access to a lot of people who didn't have health care before, and in that way it's been successful. It was passed before I was elected to Congress. And I would say that it's a work in progress, because we haven't addressed a lot of the affordability issues, particularly for small businesses. I'm one of the Democrats I've taken 10 or so votes against my party trying to fix Obamacare, trying to set a 40-hour work week instead of a 30-hour work week to trigger full-time coverage, trying to make sure that if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, and those kinds of things. So I've established a pretty independent record, because I ran on the notion that we're not going to be able to repeal Obamacare, we have to fix it. And so I think that's the job ahead of us. Right now we're seeing premium increases. Well, most people get their health care from their employers, or some are Medicare and Medicaid. They aren't affected by those increases. We've seen some pretty staggering increases from across the country. California is actually doing better, but we have a lot of work to do. And it's not just about getting coverage, it's about getting the right kind of coverage without the really high deductibles. It's just for catastrophe, it's just catastrophic. So we're not going to get rid of it, we're not going to repeal Obamacare, that's been tried. The House passed it, the Senate passed it. We have to fix it. I'm committed to doing that, and I have a record showing that I'm willing to do that.
You know, I really blame Republicans for the fact that we actually have the problem we're having with affordability in healthcare right now. Republicans never offered an opportunity for people to actually get coverage who couldn't get coverage before, and that was squarely on my party. And I really own it. And I think that one thing we need to do moving forward with healthcare is to ensure that we maintain all of the provisions that expanded healthcare for those who couldn't afford it before, because there are things like pre-existing conditions that kept them from getting that, because that's the right thing to do. But we also have to encourage congressmen, when I'm there I'll do this, to look at things that work and look at things that don't. And one of the things that's been proven to work time and again is using the free market to bring down the cost of healthcare and ensuring that you're able to keep the doctor that you want. And what we're seeing in Washington over and over is the belief that Washington has this one-size-fits-all sort of fix for everything. That the plan that works for me is the plan that works for you. And to be honest, that's just not how it works. We all have different healthcare needs. And so we really need to get to a point with Obamacare where we're able to repeal all the parts that don't work, that are driving the cost of healthcare up for those of us who can't afford it, especially the families that are suffering under crippling spikes in cost. And make sure that people like Scott, who's been in there for 3.5 years and had ample opportunity to fix it, actually get about the job of fixing it. And so that's going to be a theme tonight. We're going to talk a lot about the things that haven't been done while he's been in Congress. We're going to talk about the things that I'm going to focus on when I'm in Congress. And bringing down healthcare costs is tops.
Scott, you have 1 minute rebuttal.
You know, I really don't disagree with a lot of what Denise said, except the shot she took at me. And the reason I'm the fourth most independent Democrat by at least one ranking is that I've been willing to take votes on Obamacare, on Dodd-Frank, on things that were passed by the Democratic Congress before I was elected to fix those things. And that's why I will continue to do that. And what the hard part is in terms of the fix is to make sure that we're funding this all. I think that's going to be the challenge for us. But it is all about competition. The whole system is built around competition. And where we have competition breakdowns, we're going to have to make sure that we support that. So I agree with that, but the only point I'd make is that that's exactly what I've been doing, even when it's ticked off my own party.
Specifically, I think some of the things that need to be taken to ensure that healthcare becomes affordable again is not only do we have to increase free market competition across state lines, we need to allow people in the community, affinity groups, folks that want to band together to use their collective bargaining power to lower costs for healthcare and bargain with those insurance companies. Because we all know now that the insurance companies were the ones that actually wrote this bill, and that many people in Congress had hoped that nobody would read it. In fact, most of them didn't because it was so big when it was passed. And so, House Republicans have tried time and again to make Obamacare better. And Scott has voted against them. You can look for yourself at his record online. I don't have to argue about his record, but all I'm saying is if you've been in Congress for 3.5 years, you haven't figured out how to stop this from happening and costs continue to rise, then it's time for somebody else to go in there and try to fix it. Thanks.
We're going to move topics now, so Denise, you're going to be the first one to answer this question. San Diego has a good record of incubating tech companies and producing STEM graduates. However, past these early stages, many companies and graduates leave for other parts of the state and the country. What can you do, if elected, to keep these companies and graduates here locally?
Oh, this is my passion. I don't know if many of you know, we briefly alluded to it in the biography, but I actually started a company called the Innovators Collaborative, which worked with CEOs and venture capitalists and top leaders in our ecosystem, our innovation ecosystem. And my PR firm focuses on technology companies, and I worked at a biotech company that had a renewable energy component to it. And so my life is this technology and this innovation economy. And not only that, I founded the Algae Caucus Congressional Caucus that Scott now chairs in Washington when I was there. And so the best way to do that is to make sure that what we're doing here makes sense for our businesses to stay and grow. San Diego is the best place to start a business, but it's one of the worst places to grow one. And what we've seen is over 7,000 businesses have left California over the last 9 years and left countless of people without jobs, making it more difficult to afford to live here. So we need to lower regulations, reduce regulations that don't make any business sense to enable us to grow. And we have to lower taxes to ensure that what we're doing is competitive with the rest of the country. And while I can't fix what's happening in Sacramento, I can promise you that I'm going to go to Washington and make sure they don't make it more difficult for you to grow and thrive and prosper and reinvest and hire more people in good paying jobs right here in San Diego.
Well, there are a lot of California dimensions to it, but from a national perspective, our country is in a race for talent. We will not be able to compete in a brain-powered economy unless we keep those brains here. What does that mean? It means investing in basic scientific research that keeps our talent in the United States so that young scientists know that they can have a career in science. They don't have to go back to go to some other country. We have to have immigration policies that keeps talent here so that we educate some of the smartest people in the world at some of the best universities, and then we tell them, you don't have a permission slip to stay. Go start your company or cure your disease someplace else. That makes no sense. And like me, kids who don't have a lot of money growing up, we need financial aid. We can't be charging 6 to 8% on kids who are for student loans. Then we're trying to make money off them. The way we want to make money off them is wait for they grow a business, then they make money, then they pay taxes. That's when you get your money back. You don't use them as a profit center. As a national policy, those are all things I've been working on. From a California perspective, we have a housing crisis, and that's driven up the cost of housing here. And that's a statewide thing, and I've been active with Sacramento trying to support Governor Brown in the reforms he wants to make to allow housing by right, to reduce the litigation that delays housing projects so we can build more housing. And we need to make sure that our education, but what made the Golden State golden is that the state invested in education at places like the University of California or the state system. That needs to keep happening as well.
So I think your question was, how do we ensure that we actually have jobs to come back to here? And so I go back to our original premise. The answer is not more and more and more federal interference. The answer is to get more of the government out of the way so we can actually have jobs and companies that can grow. Now I can tell you, as a small business person, it is incredibly difficult to do business here. And that's because the same regulations that you have for huge businesses apply to us as well. And every year under this administration, we've had 4,000 additional regulations passed that no small business owner can afford to keep up with because we simply don't have the bandwidth. So I can tell you that that is a crippling thing for businesses. And when you're talking about prosperity, you have to have jobs to go to when you graduate so that you can pay off that student debt. And there's a comprehensive approach to it. But to look at Washington as only the place where you get more and more, and not to talk about ways to actually make it competitive to stay and have jobs, is only hitting part of it. And I would just say this, I'm on the board of one of the leading national STEM organizations, powered by Cisco. It was actually started by the Cisco families of mortgages, and I know a lot about STEM, and we need to keep investing in that here in San Diego. Thanks.
I hope you don't interpret as getting in the way things like investing in science, a reasonable immigration policy that brings talent here, reunites families, and investments in student loans and student education. That's not getting in the way. That's the federal government doing its role. We shouldn't be over-regulated, but we should be doing those things, and I support it. There's a reason that I'm endorsed by the Regional Chamber of Commerce here, the first congressional candidate they've ever endorsed from either party. 90% of the members are small businesses. It's because that they see that I'm supportive of the approach to keep jobs in San Diego. Same with Biocom, where I'm 3-time legislator of the year. They've endorsed me because they see biotechnology as an important thing here that I've been fighting for. And the National Chamber of Commerce, one of 5 Democrats last time endorsed by the National Chamber of Commerce. I'm really proud of that because business problems have bipartisan solutions. That's the way I've approached those problems, and we'll continue to do that.
I know there's more we want to say on this topic, but we're going to move on. There are closing remarks too, so you can add a little bit more at the end. We are going to move on to a question. We're trying to cover a lot of ground here, and then I believe Scott gets the first answer on this one. The question is, what is your position on national security issues specific to the Asian region, and please name your top priority.
Well, I guess, in Asia, the chief threat to us is North Korea, and we have to be diligent about that. We have to generally be smart, and we have to be tough on terrorism internationally, which means defeating our enemies without getting dragged into more civil wars. We've had a large presence in Korea for 50 years now. I would say one other thing that's important for security is diplomacy. The range of things you do with a country goes from state dinners to nuclear war. One of the most important things in the middle is an economic engagement. I'm a supporter of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Denise does not support. I think that would be very vital in terms of establishing relationships with allies in Asia, like Malaysia, like Vietnam, like continuing with Japan and Korea, to make sure that those economic relationships can provide us leverage in diplomacy that can prevent us from having to deal with to move more ships in there. I'm also supportive of a strong Navy, by the way. We have to push back against China's aggression, but I do think there's a role for diplomacy, for being smart about our foreign policy. I think trade plays a big part of that.
You know, in 1994, President Clinton struck an accord with North Korea that has now resulted in 6 to 12 nuclear warheads, and that was the description of that was diplomacy. But unfortunately, there wasn't enough trust on either side, and so today we have a rogue North America that's threatening the stability of the entire region. It is time that we build stronger relationships with China. And that is such a natural thing for me, given my background. I actually worked in Shanghai and Beijing, and I worked in the British Embassy, actually, where we were working on economic affairs and strengthening them. And so I know that that's critical. We have to understand the importance that they play in leveraging additional support to us to achieve the aims that we need to achieve in order to have regional stability, especially with respect to North Korean aggression. So that's critical. North Korea is a problem because of the nuclear issue. And with respect to the stability of our world, Scott voted for the Iran nuclear agreement, which is very similar to the 1994 nuclear agreement that was struck with North Korea. And we have seen history. History is a remarkable teacher. And when we study it, we can see what can happen. Unfortunately, some folks didn't study it and are voting for the Iran nuclear agreement, which is actually one of the biggest destabilizers. And so when we look at the different issues that destabilize our region, our country, our world, those are two things that I think we need to look carefully, is look at what happened in North Korea, see if that makes sense for our current threat efforts and what's going on across the globe. And finally, with respect to TPP, you know, I'm against the TPA, which gives away our ability to make the TPP stronger. It gives away the democratic process of improving the TPP. I'm not against smart trade.
Denise, wrap up.
Thank you very much.
I just have to say a few words about the Iran nuclear deal because it's quite different from North Korea. And the Iran nuclear deal gave back money that was used as leverage to get Iran to the table so that we could get them to dismantle their nuclear program. And that's exactly what's happened. 98% of the fissile nuclear material has been moved out of Iran. The plutonium reactor has been dismantled. You can't bomb that. The centrifuges, most of them have been dismantled. And we have inspectors, none of which we have in North Korea, who can look over every inch of Iran and find out that they're cheating. And we've never given up the nuclear option, which is all we had before and is all we have with North Korea. So it is a much smarter approach. And it was multilateral too. So I think it's a much better approach. I'm proud of it, and I would also say that that money was in Asian banks and was in European banks. It was going back to Iran anyway, because those other people, including China and Russia, who we brought to the table, wanted to trade with Iran. So that's the kind of thing we want to do. It's an alternative to war. If my opponent wants another war in the Middle East, you should just say so.
You can just call me Denise. You don't have to call me Nicole. We're pretty civil here. So I would talk about the Iran nuclear agreement since you opened that up. You and about 22% of Americans think it's a good idea. And the rest of us know that it's not. And you can look at Scott's own op-ed from July 3rd in the Union Tribune to see the 4 areas that he outlined that he said needed to be met, because he said no deal was better than a bad deal. And none of those 4 were actually met. One of the specific areas that I think we have the most problem with as Americans is the fact that Iran can delay inspections by up to 24 days. 24 days. So, this really comes down to a very basic belief. Either you believe that America should allow $150 billion to go into the hands of the world's lead state sponsor of terror as admitted by Secretary Kerry, or you think that's a bad idea given that Iran supports Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and has ties to terrorist networks throughout the region. We either believe that America should give that power away to those sorts of people, or we believe that we need to protect American interests and our allies first. I stand with America and our allies.
Thank you, both. Our next question here goes first to Denise. What is your position on the Highway Transportation Bill of 2015, and will you pledge to work with members from both parties to seek more funding for San Diego's infrastructure needs?
We have a lot of measures right now that are dealing with the infrastructure needs, and I've been briefed by folks on the Republican side of the House about the Highway Transportation Bill. We have a crumbling infrastructure in America, and this is something that must be a priority that only our federal government can undertake. And so I am very much a supporter of the Highway Transportation Bill. However, The proposals that have been put forth with regard to how we fund them often have to do with taxing Americans more. Now, I don't think the answer to every single effort to increase government's effectiveness and to bring services that we need to America comes at a cost to us. I think Washington needs to be a lot more responsible about the money that we put in their hands, and we need to learn how to prioritize the money that we have to put into the things that matter the most to us. And I believe that infrastructure is critical in this country. So I hope that in Congress, we'll get an opportunity to prioritize that.
So I'm for the bill, and I actually understand we have to fund it. And the problem is, what Denise has said 3 times now is that she supports it, but she wants a better deal. On highways, she wants a better deal. On trade, she wants a better deal. On Iran, she wants a better deal. So she wants all these things, but you have to vote for those things. And part of it is funding. And so I understand that the Highway Trust Fund hasn't been raised in 20 years, and maybe that's a way to do it, but the money's going to have to come from somewhere. I understand that. I actually am proud of the bipartisan support we've had to bring money for infrastructure to San Diego. $500 million for the border crossing, which improves trade across the border, lowers wait times, and improves security at the same time. $1 billion we're going to invest in federal money for San Diego to get a trolley from UCSD and UTC Mall down to downtown. We'll deal with some of the highway traffic. Major investments, hundreds of millions of dollars for a new facility to train the SEALs in Coronado, the Navy SEALs, and new facilities at Miramar for aircraft, a $10 million grant for the port to redo its infrastructure and to improve trade. Now, all these things have been done because I worked together in a bipartisan way with my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, mostly around San Diego, to find solutions. I'm happy to do that with a larger country, but we're all going to have to, you don't get another vote. You have to vote yes or no. And I'm willing to vote yes on the Highway Trust Fund bill.
San Diego's congressional delegation has had a great history of working well together on those issues. And I do credit Scott with doing that because I think he's done a good job of working with Congressman Issa, Congressman Hunter, Congresswoman Susan Davis, and Congressman Vargas. That's important. We have a long history of that because we are such an evenly divided region. But I would take issue with maybe one thing that he said, which will probably not surprise me. We have a $20 trillion debt that has grown by $10 trillion in the last 8 years. We have one of the most unaffordable cities to live in the entire country. If every answer is to increase taxes on the people who are already suffering, trying to make ends meet here in San Diego, and there's no sense of accountability in Washington, they're getting away with something that none of us in this room get away with, which is every one of us has to balance our budgets at home and in our businesses. We have to be responsible for what we do with our money. The answer is not always to ask you, who are always being squeezed, to give more to fund their interests.
When I first ran for Congress in 2012, one of the things that really vexed me was that every Republican had signed a pledge that no tax bill would go up for anybody, no matter how wealthy you were. And I just think it's too doctrinaire. That doesn't work. It's not practical. And I'm part of a group affiliated with a group called Fix the Debt. Fix the Debt has named me a fiscal hero because I'm willing to do a Simpson-Bowles kind of approach. Simpson-Bowles was a task force that was set up in 2010 to figure out what to do about long-term debt. Long-term debt is a threat to our ability to invest over time in the things we need to do: science, education, infrastructure. And I'm willing to put a lot of things on the table to talk about a comprehensive solution, a grand bargain between the president, maybe President Clinton, and maybe Speaker Ryan. But it's going to involve a lot of compromise, and it may be that people with very high incomes see that their tax bills go up. And I think that's fair, and it might be good for the country. I'm willing to consider it. Don't want to raise taxes for wealthy people, might consider it.
And then the next question goes first to Scott. What do you think the role of the government should be as it pertains to the business community, and specifically the current regulatory regime coming out of DC?
When I joined the Judiciary Committee this year, I asked to be on the subcommittee on intellectual property that deals with the kinds of issues that we have here in San Diego, and on the regulatory reform subcommittee. I represented a lot of businesses when I was an environmental lawyer trying to get permits. And I learned that the cost of delay was a real true cost, and was very vexed with that. So I proposed working with Republicans on things like making sure that energy permits or facilities have to be issued within two years. And that all the environmental review has to be streamlined through one agency. I'm the only Democrat, was the first Democrat on a bill to amend the Americans with Disabilities Act to provide an opportunity to cure, so that before you get sued because your ramp is off a little bit, you'll get a notice and you get the opportunity to fix it so you don't have those lawsuits. And again, I told you about my business endorsements. The Chamber of Commerce has endorsed me, which is very unusual for a Democrat, because I'm willing to make those changes. I believe we can achieve high standards, and we need high regulatory standards, because some people cheat, like Wells Fargo, like Volkswagen. But we can do that with a minimal imposition of problems on the economy by thinking of ways to streamline. I've been a part of that, often voted against my own party with the Republicans to make sure that we do that, and willing to do that again.
Regulations are the silent job killer. They truly are. Again, 4,000 regulations passed by the federal government every single year without any sense of whether or not there's a cost-benefit analysis to actually putting these regulations in place. Obamacare is a perfect example of a regulation that doesn't make good business sense the way it's applied. And so, I am actually endorsed by the NFIB, which is the leading voice of small business. And they said that Scott votes against small businesses' interests 70% of the time. So when you talk about job creation and the fact that 95% of all new jobs are created by small businesses, you think about why we're in the debacle we are in with affordability and a lack of good paying jobs. It is his votes for regulations that don't make sense that caused the NFIB to say that he is not for small business and actually votes against them 70% of the time. Now, with respect to the chamber endorsement that he touts all the time, I wasn't even in the race when he was given the endorsement. It was given last August. And it was because he agreed to give away our democratic input by voting for the TPA in support of free trade at any cost. At President Obama's negotiation cost, at our cost, without any input to help improve a free trade bill that has massive impacts on American workers. And so when you talk about these endorsements, make sure we understand, I just want us all to be on the same page, that this happened before I was ever in the race and I had no other options. And so I'm close to a lot of the folks in the chamber, and I'm excited about representing the business community. Thanks.
I would just say one thing about the NFIB since we're talking about endorsements. They endorse a higher percentage of Republicans than the National Rifle Association. So I didn't really have much chance at that one. I would just say about the chamber, I'm really proud of the chamber endorsement. It's the first time they've endorsed anyone from either party for Congress. And the reason was because I stood up to political pressure to do what I thought was the right thing for San Diego. I'll do that again, and I will vote for TPP to raise standards for workers across the country, across the world, so that when our workers compete against workers in Vietnam or Malaysia, those people will have rights that make it a little bit more expensive for them to compete against our people. It will also be subject to the same environmental standards that we take for granted, that are the right thing to do, but impose costs on our businesses, but not on our competitor nations. And we'll protect intellectual property. At the same time, we do all that national security diplomacy through trade that's so important. So, you gotta push a yes or no button, and on those things, I'm a yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Go for it.
good. I'm a small business owner, so I can only speak from personal experience as to what I know to be true in my ability to actually create jobs. And when regulations get in the way of that, I'll give you a perfect example. When I left my law firm in Washington, D.C. to go in-house for a renewable energy company here, it was a biotech company, we were subjected to all of the California state regulations. When we tried to grow algae in California, we couldn't get through the regulatory regime of California because it was so much more rigorous than the NEPA regulations that came out of Washington. So we moved 150 employees out of San Diego into New Mexico, where we could get permitted in 90 days. And we grew businesses and had economic development there in a way that offered people in Las Cruces, New Mexico, enormous opportunity. And guess what? We did it off of the intellectual property and ideas that spun out of Scripps Institute. SIO. And so I want to keep those jobs here. I am looking out for the interests of workers here. I'm not looking out for anyone except for small business owners like us who can actually hire people, and I can tell you regulations kill the jobs.
Thank you, Rob. And then Ron will ask a couple of the audience questions. Okay. So Denise will actually get this first one here. This is a question from the audience. What are your thoughts on the Dakota Access Pipeline?
So energy independence is one of the most important things in our nation. When I joined my renewable energy company in 2007, because I felt like the reason we were actually going to war is because we had to buy oil from countries that don't like us. So we were funding both sides of the war. We have enormous natural resources here in America. We need to continue to be sure that we leverage them to our interests while doing them in an environmentally responsible way. And so whether it's energy or any other issue, we have to make sure that we're creating jobs here and we're becoming more and more energy independent every single day.
The question was about the pipeline. So I'll tell you what I know about it. First of all, it's a decision typically not made by the Congress. It's made by the administration through a review process. It's going through that review process. I will tell you that some of the disturbing things I've heard from a perspective of actually getting it built as a practical matter are the sovereignty issues around the tribes. And it seems like the government may have conducted its activities in a way that's going to put us behind the eight ball. With respect to larger energy policy, though, I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in the market. The availability of natural gas has made energy prices very, very low. That's good for business, and it's good for American competitiveness. We really need to make sure that we capture the fugitive methane emissions, though, from that operation, because although natural gas burns cleaner than coal, if you lose a lot of it to the atmosphere in the distribution or the exploration, it defeats all the climate benefits of that. I'm also excited about what's happening in solar as a competitive matter. We are seeing the price of solar down near where natural gas is when it's a sunny day. And that means we really ought to get out of the business of subsidizing these other kinds of legacy energy sources. We pay a lot of money to oil and gas companies that are very profitable that they don't need. That's one way to budget to balance the budget is to get rid of those tax expenditures. I challenge Denise to join me in that and get rid of the oil and gas subsidies.
When I was in Washington, I was one of the only Republicans who actually advocated. I advocated in front of a Republican Congress on behalf of ensuring that we had a renewable fuel standard, a national renewable fuel standard that required that we blend more and more renewable fuels into our energy mix so we could switch from fossil fuels into a renewable realm, because that is the future. We want to build for future generations. The problem was, while we were advocating for that, the government was imposing all sorts of things that didn't make any sense. So they were actually punishing the oil companies. And guess what? Oil companies, they're not charities. When they punish oil companies, who do you think pays for them? Us. And so all this notion that we're punishing oil companies, they're just going to pass the cost on consumers. And guess who gets affected the most by that? Those of us who can least afford it. And so we have to have a renewable energy policy that actually makes sense. And what we have to do is ensure that we have things like the RFS in place to incentivize the continued growth, but when they do not exist, like cellulosic ethanol fuels, we have to make sure that we're not punishing ourselves by saying we're punishing oil companies. It doesn't make any sense.
I didn't propose punishing anyone. All I said was we shouldn't be subsidizing oil companies that are otherwise profitable in these markets. I want to make that clear. That's not a punishment. They might not like it, but there's no need for us to be spending your tax money to help extract oil and gas out of the ground when they can do that perfectly well as a market matter. I am a believer that climate change is human cause. I think that's been my portfolio on the Armed Services Committee, because I'm the person who's helping to lead the Navy and the Marines to use renewable energy to make our nation more secure. The Navy saw a few years ago that the price of oil would spike and they had to reorient their whole mission. So they decided a while ago to be 50% renewable. We announced the biggest purchase of renewable energy by any federal department in Coronado with solar power from Sempra. We're building hybrid ships. They go up to 12 knots on conventional, on electricity. We're over that on conventional, and we're launching a great green fleet powered in part by advanced biofuels, and I'm proud to be a part of that as well.
Thank you both. I know we veered a little bit off course from the original question, but I hope the audience got a broader understanding of where each candidate stands on energy policies. Do we have time for one more? Okay, one more audience question. This one goes to Scott, and I'm going to just narrow this one here as far as what is your top issue that you support that would benefit the AAPI community here in San Diego?
Well, the AAPI community is concerned about a lot of things that all of us are concerned about, whether it's education, whether it's helping small business, and whether it's having the ability to get yourself educated and compete and move ahead. That's what my family did. My father's a minister. I'm a middle-class kid. I had that opportunity. We all want that opportunity. So from that perspective, we want to make everything work. And I want you to know, too, that I've spent a lot of time reaching out to this community. I haven't just started this effort. I've been coming to festivals and to meetings, and I've met with Consul General of Thailand. I'm friends with Audia de Castro, the Consul General of the Philippines was here. I got to know the Filipino ambassador and visited President Tsai, the new president of Taiwan in Los Angeles. This is something that's been part of my service throughout my 16 years of public service. And so I think we've been close to the API community, figuring out what you need to do. The other thing I just mentioned is that I'm really proud to bring up my own young leaders. So you may know Howard Oh. Howard is a Chinese American who went on to work as a fellow for the Asia Pacific American Caucus in Washington. Anthony Nguyen, he's here, Anthony. Vietnamese born, raised in San Diego, worked here for me first. We sent him out to work on legislation and healthcare policy in DC. Now he's back to be our head of constituent services. You may know Woo Jin Shim, who worked for me at the City Council. You don't know Lu Mei Wang, who's now at Deloitte after going to business school after working for me. I believe bringing up young leaders is part of my mission as well.
I'm really lucky to be Chinese and part of the API community, so I don't have to do much reaching out. I'm concerned about the issues that affect our community and affect me as part of the community. I want to tell you something that is really important to the community because it affected me. There are many areas in society right now where the API community has been treated unfairly. There's injustice, not only in the criminal, in the area of our legislative judiciary area, but also in education. So affirmative action is one of those areas that I think really impacts us disproportionately. And last year, there was a headline in the Economist article, and it said, "The model minority is losing patience." And I sense that everywhere I go. I get a sense that whether in culture, whether it's a Jesse Waters video, where people are making fun of the Chinese community, or whether all different Asian communities, or whether it's something where we have proposals like SCA 5 or Harvard admissions policies that prevent us from moving forward on the basis of who we are at the very core, those are issues that impacted me. In 1995, when I applied to Stanford, I was told I was the wrong minority. They loved my scores, they loved my grades, but for some reason I was born the wrong minority. I never forgot that. I never want any child in our community to feel like the best way to stop racism, Chief Justice Roberts said this actually, the best way to stop racism is to stop using it as a basis of discrimination. And so I believe that it's unfair to target us in the areas of criminal justice and in education, and I will fight for you every single day because it affects me too.
I don't disagree with anything Denise just said. I also want to point out that in 2014, SC5 came up, and I talked with Dr. Chan about this, and I opposed that effort because I thought that these decisions should be merit-based. I want you to know that too. That's why I reach out to make sure that I'm understanding where folks are coming from. But also I have a long history. I'm a civil rights Democrat, and my dad fought to desegregate housing in the suburbs of Detroit. It's in my DNA. And so I'm proud to stand up with you and with other ethnic groups to make sure you're not discriminated against. One thing we could all do to really speak up against discrimination, though, is to voice our outrage at Donald Trump. And I think one of the things I would mention about Denise is that she won't even say who she's voting for president. The easiest thing, if you want to talk about back against racism, the easiest thing would be to say you're not going to vote for Donald Trump, and I'd love to hear her say that.
This is an amazing tactic the Democrats have used very, very well against all sorts of people, as if focusing on one of the two people who would be irrelevant after November 8th has any bearing on the policy issues that we are going to be dealing with moving forward to help our country move forward. If I were Scott and I had only passed one bill in my 3.5 years in Congress, I would want to focus on Donald Trump too. So I would just say, at the end of the day, when you call yourself a civil rights Democrat, there was a huge civil rights issue that came up that I was a part of when Officer Peter Liang in Brooklyn was treated unfairly and used as a scapegoat when he shot an unarmed black man in Brooklyn in a project. Now, I was here with the Chinese community, some of the leaders of whom are here, marching and speaking out against that sort of discriminatory activity. Scott was in Flint, Michigan. He sent a statement at the last minute, and he didn't even send a staffer to help. So when you talk about the people that are with you and the hard fights and the things that really, really matter, those issues affect me as part of the API community. And I will always stand with you in every respect, whether it's in education or it's anywhere else that we're treated unfairly, the criminal justice system, I will fight for you.
And I know that both sides probably have a lot more to say. Unfortunately, we only had 2.5 minutes for each question, but what I do encourage before we get to closing remarks is that everyone in the audience that wants to know more details about where each of the candidates stand, please talk to them in person, contact their campaigns so that we can get a little bit more details. Unfortunately, we don't have all night, although I wish we would. But we do want to get to our closing remarks here. Denise, you have 2 minutes.
You know, when I jumped into this race, it wasn't something that I'd ever planned to do. If you all read an article, my mom being classic Chinese, there was an article recently in the Times of San Diego where my mom said, you know, somebody asked her, what did you think Denise would ever do? Did you think she would ever do this? She said, no, I just wanted to be a grandma. And I wish she'd just gotten married and, you know, just had kids and just been a grandma, not somebody who wanted to do all these other things with their lives. And, you know, I thought, I didn't even really ever plan on jumping in. And it wasn't until I saw bad decisions being made and votes being taken by Scott that I disagreed with that I wanted to jump in, because I want to fight for the things that matter to us. And, you know, when I jumped in, I realized, gosh, you know, I knew there was a strong API presence, but I didn't realize how strong. And to believe that this community, 20% of our district is the API community. You have a voice. We have District 6 that was carved out so that we could have representation here locally. But isn't it time that we got some bipartisan representation at the highest levels of government? And aren't you excited to potentially make history by electing the first ever Republican Chinese congresswoman ever in our nation's history? It's way past time that this happened. And we are going to do it in this election, and I'm going to do it with your help. So I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your support. But most of all, I'm asking for your hearts. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us tonight. You know, this job is really about effectiveness. I just want to address that for a minute. First, and I have not been just starting this. I've been working in San Diego in public life for 16 years now, on city council, on board, and now in Congress. I've developed a real relationship with many of you through that work. Whoever wins this election, I'll be working with you afterward because you have my heart, you have my commitment. I've made San Diego my life's work. This is about getting stuff done, and I want to just address the cheap shot about getting one bill passed. That's actually not true. I've drafted and introduced a number of bills that didn't get passed on their own, but got put into other pieces of legislation. If you want to look at that, just go to the accomplishments section of the website, because there are a lot of them. I also mentioned a lot of the money that we brought here, because advocacy is a big part of this job. And understanding San Diego and working in a bipartisan way is how you get results like $500 million on the border, $1 billion for a trolley, $250 million for the Navy SEALs, $10 million for the port. Those are all important things that are going to improve job quality here. And I would just say that's the reason why I've got endorsements from across the board. So I've got traditionally Democratic endorsements like Planned Parenthood, or the League of Conservation Voters, and Citizens United, which deals with money in politics. But also Republican-leaning endorsements because of my bipartisanship, Biocom, the regional chamber, the National Chamber of Commerce, 5 Democrats last time. I'm a pretty remarkable animal to them, that I could be a Democrat that would get their support. But it's because business problems have bipartisan solution. I will always fight for your civil rights. I've shown that throughout my time. It's in my DNA, it's for part of my family. And I've fought those fights for you. And I'll always sit down at a table with anyone to solve business problems, locally, at the state level in Washington, D.C. And that's the approach we need. It's the approach I'll continue to bring if you're kind enough to send me back for a third term. Thank you very much for the honor.
Thank you both so much. Please do not go anywhere. We have a very important race, the city attorney's race coming up. But can we please give another round of applause here. Thank you both very much. And again, if you want to get any more information about some of the topics they addressed tonight, please contact their campaigns specifically. I'm sure they would be more than willing to answer those questions.